During that period of Michelle's life, she experienced extreme excitement as well as wrenching apprehension. Her final year of high school was filled with surprises, including finding out she was pregnant. She was fortunate enough to have had everyone around her supporting her, although she knew all too well that her parents would take time to adjust. Little did Michelle know what lay ahead. The North Dallas High School graduate Michelle Denson was an A-plus student. Both of her parents were very proud of their daughter, who was a bit of an overachiever. She was the head cheerleader of their school's football team as well as a good student. The very sports field where Michelle met her boyfriend was where she met him. According to her peers, Michelle was a pretty girl. Long blonde hair and an athletic body characterized her. Her immense popularity made her the envy of every girl at school. Although Michelle was a mean girl, she was not cruel. The kindness and sincerity she exhibited were natural to her, and she was willing to help anyone who needed it. Her peers were all willing to help her, but she didn't know it. She served as a role model to her younger siblings and was very proud of her achievements. Being a head cheerleader and maintaining good grades sometimes put Michelle under pressure. As well as taking care of her parents, she helped out at home a lot. With the news she would receive, everything would soon reach a critical point. Despite Michelle's hectic and busy schedule, Richard, her boyfriend of 4 months, still found time for her. A mutual friend circle had formed after he started college. They enjoyed hanging out at the mall and eating lunch at the local diner on weekends. They were in love, and Michelle confided in her friends that she saw a future with Richard. Richard would always surprise Michelle with sweet gestures and little gifts. There was something romantic about him that she loved. The grand gestures he made were sometimes embarrassing to her, and she would always bring gifts to the school. She was constantly being spoiled by her boyfriend, which made her friends jealous over time. Only if their boyfriends would do the same for them could they be happy. Michelle stumbled out of bed clutching her stomach one summer morning. She ran to her bathroom feeling really ill. While focusing on what she might have eaten, she began throwing up. A few minutes passed as she sat. She'll make it to school today, won't she? She couldn't miss cheerleading practice today. They had an important practice. Her pain in class kept her from paying attention to the lesson. It still felt strange to her, and she was nauseated. Despite thinking about going to the school nurse, she decided not to. In cheerleading practice, she felt a nagging pain in her stomach. The school nurse did not help her after practice despite her best efforts. The nurse gave Michelle something to take away the nausea as Michelle sat on the bed. Michelle didn't feel nervous. Having finished inspecting her, the nurse asked a strange question. "When was your last period?" Michelle couldn't recall. She knew she was expecting it, but she was quite late for it. "You should take a pregnancy test." The nurse couldn't believe what she was saying. As she raced to the pharmacy, she got out of the car. It was difficult for her to decide what to purchase from the many tests. Having a shot of nerves and sweating profusely, her body was in a state of shock. Then she paid at the counter for 2 tests she grabbed off the shelf. She immediately blushed when she saw the lady's strange look. This was a matter of life and death for her, and she had to get home as soon as possible to conduct these tests. After running up the stairs, she shut the door to her bedroom. It would mean a complete change in her life if the test came back positive. On her bed, she thought about what was going to happen to her future for 5 minutes. She heard a beep from her phone. The results were ready to be checked. Michelle's heart was pounding out of her chest. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she viewed the tests. Positive results were obtained from both of them. As a cheerleader and a pregnant student, how was she going to manage everything? It was her dream to become a mother, but it wasn't the right time for her. All the tears she could manage to shed fell from Michelle's eyes as she lay on her bed. The situation devastated her beyond belief. There was a feeling that her life was over for her. It was time for her to tell her mother. There was an honest and good relationship between the two, and Michelle was confident she could tell her anything she wanted. The most important thing she needed to do was tell Richard, as after all, he was the father. A call from Michelle's bedroom brought her mother up. Her mind was blown by what she was experiencing. In the middle of her bed, Michelle burst into tears once again, unable to control her tears. She was beyond shocked when her mom heard about it. When they were alone, Michelle knew something would happen. That's what teenagers do. Her daughter held her, and she assured her everything would be fine without passing judgment. In a stable environment, the baby would grow up with all the support it needs. Michelle felt relieved to find her mother to be so understanding and helpful. However, there was still her father, and she was unsure how he would react. At first, her mom assured her he would be upset, but eventually he would find a way to move on. Richard and all of Michelle's friends still needed to be told. She was unsure of how they would react to her, since she was supposed to be a role model. She had a lot to live up to. As a failure, she did not want the whole school to view her negatively. She and her mother suggested speaking with the teacher at the school together. Her teachers needed to plan around her pregnancy and how it would affect her schooling. Cheerleading would also have to come to an end for her. The hardest part was telling Richard. Her husband had just started college, and she was not sure how it would affect their relationship. Despite his shock, he vowed to remain by her side. It was clear that he cared deeply for her. As far as he was concerned, his strict conservative parents were his only concern. It wasn't clear how they would break the news to them, since Michelle hadn't met them yet. Waiting in the office for the teacher, Michelle was very nervous. Her reputation as a good girl had never allowed her to be in the room before. It never occurred to her that she would be sitting in that chair while pregnant. The teacher was surprised by Michelle's parents' support. As a result, she was surprised by Michelle's level of maturity. Michelle had to tell her friends her unexpected news after they reached an agreement. Despite being in love with Richard, she hadn't told them she took things to the next level. As a result, she now had his baby on the way. There would be shock on their faces. Bracing herself, Michelle stood up. Their favorite mall lunch spot was a great place to meet after school, so she suggested meeting there after school. They were shocked and surprised when she finally revealed what she had done to them. They were shocked to learn that the good girl, leader cheerleader, was expecting. The new arrival to their circle was welcomed with excitement and support. Playing dress-up with the baby was their favorite part of the day. Her growing stomach could no longer be hidden as the months went by. The pregnancy was now well known in the school. The stomach was part of her and wasn't going anywhere, so she had moments of embarrassment and other times of pride. She didn't care what people thought. Besides prom and graduation, the school year was also nearing an end. The good news is that her Aunt Janie had been sewing for a month already and had already finished all her outfits. As a result of gaining a bit of weight, she may need to add more fabric. Posters announcing the prom and graduation dates were everywhere in the school, announcing everyone's outfits. There was a day difference between them, but they lived less than a month apart. It was hard for Michelle to keep up with everything, especially since she was pregnant and tired all the time. Richard was her date for prom night. His excitement was evident as he got dressed in a special tux. Her dress was specially made to accommodate her growing belly, and Michelle couldn't wait to show him. The prom queen was confident they would be kings and queens. Finally, the prom night arrived, and Michelle and Richard had a great time. Their friends made them feel like king and queen, but they didn't get the crown. Now we just had to get through graduation. It was the end of her school year, and she was having a baby. Her life was going to change drastically. However, it wasn't in the way Michelle had envisioned. She received a very disturbing phone call from the principal on the very day of the graduation. Their graduation plans were canceled because Michelle was not allowed to attend. The incident outraged Michelle and her family. Who made this decision, and on what grounds? Despite her hard work, Michelle was one of the best students in the school. It was not going to be easy for the Densons. In case their daughter did not attend graduation that night, they marched to the school fully intent on raising the roof. As a result of her state, Mr. Green did not want Michelle to attend. She vowed to escalate her complaints to the school board after hearing that statement. In Michelle's case, she was discriminated against and unfairly treated. The principal was banning Michelle from graduating, so she called Richard in tears. She was assured by Richard that the matter would be resolved. In the end, Mr. Green couldn't reason with them, and they ended up screaming at each other. As a result, Michelle left the office to get some fresh air because she couldn't handle the yelling. Richard showed up as she was getting in the car, in a huge hurry. He didn't look Michelle's way when she ran after him, calling his name. During the meeting, Mr. Green turned to Richard and said, "We have to leave now." He asked him, "What are you doing here?" He glanced at his son in confusion and said, "Dad, please let my girlfriend Michelle attend her graduation. She's carrying my baby." This was the girlfriend he was bragging about, but he and Mrs. Green had never met before. Everyone calmed down after Mr. Green apologized. Her father is the school's principal, and Richard didn't tell her that. He kept it quiet for a reason, but she understood. A new relationship had just begun between them. Michelle received top honors and was allowed to graduate. She gave birth to a baby boy in the presence of her parents as well as Richard. Richard comes by every day to look after Caleb while she lives with her parents.